So hey everyone, welcome to Deep Dive. We're in for a bit of a trash talking today.
Yay.
Sounds fun to say
The
that.
best kind.
Yeah. Crispina and Stephen with you today. Now, Crispy, when was the last time you recycled something?
I'm quite terrible at it. So the last time I stashed some old clothes into one of those, bins where you recycle old clothes.
Okay,
The one near Plaza Singapura.
right.
Okay, but I don't really separate my trash. There is a blue bin downstairs.
But have you been there?
No, of course I've been there, but it's a bin that is used when the smaller bin is full.
Oh,
That's the problem.
Okay, so it's supposed to be only for recyclable items,
Yes,
but you're saying it's
but
not.
no, most people just
Okay.
use it for their regular.
So you end up leaving the blue bin feeling blue because it hasn't achieved its purpose.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, what about you,
Me,
Steve?
I recycle quite a bit, but more just like cardboard, glass after your wine bottle, chili sauce bottle, that kind of stuff,
But you wash it out?
I rinse it out. Yeah, I don't wash it per se. I rinse it until it looks clean enough, then I trash it. I don't know,
Okay.
is that good enough?
That's
Good enough.
good enough. Much
We'll find
better than
out.
me. Okay, so you can guess what we're talking about today. The latest statistics have come out from the National Environment Agency, NEA. And the good thing is our domestic waste has fallen. Well, we're basically throwing out less trash. But the bad news is our overall recycling rate has dropped from 62 to 52% over the last decade.
Yeah, it's a challenge because actually we want to hit 70% in terms of the recycling rate by 2030. So the question is, can we even meet this KPI? Is it realistic? So we generated less waste overall. So what does this tell us? Are we more conscious of the amount of things we're consuming, or perhaps inflation? Things are more expensive. We're just buying less. What do you guys make of this?
I think, when we look at waste generated, that we have decreased, I think it's a good sign.
Do you feel like it's a good step?
I think it's a good step, but I
Okay.
think the caveat is we're looking at waste generated, whereas I think it's also important to look at the waste that's being disposed or being thrown into our landfills. Because when you generate waste, it can go into two different areas, right? One is it gets recycled, and the other is it gets disposed and fills up our landfill. And if you look at that stats, we're actually, the amount of waste that's being disposed into our landfills actually is increasing. Not per capita, not per person, because we don't have that stats on hand. And, Semakau has like a limited capacity, and we
Right.
don't want that to fill up as well. So I think that's a more critical statistic that we want to solve rather than just looking at waste generation per se.
I'm heartened by the decrease in the numbers. I think this is due to one of the initiatives the government has put up, the Zero Waste Nation. So that was to encourage people to reduce the amount of waste being disposed of. So I think that is a critical first step. I do agree with Huileng that the amount of waste being sent to the landfill and the incinerators have not decreased much, but the starting point is to decrease how much waste we throw out. And from
Right.
there,
Yeah.
maybe we can increase the amount we recycle or reuse. Then that will help us to achieve that lowering of the actual waste being disposed of.
But realistically, I mean, there's always going to be more waste. We consume more each and every year. It's so easy to buy stuff online,
Yeah.
Even stuff you don't need. Well, often you don't need,
Well, one of the outcomes of that initiative for Zero Waste Nation is that we use less of the single-use items.
Ah, okay.
So, like, I think there were straws that were banned, and then they asked us to reduce the maybe use of paper cups and bringing more of your bottles. So that's a starting point.
But I just want to pick up on that bit. You mentioned the straws, because I once had this debate with someone. I said, yeah, we're reducing straws. They're like, that's rubbish. It really doesn't make much difference. Reducing all the straws in I don't know how many countries is still not equivalent to one factory palm oil plantation somewhere in the world shutting down for one day. So is it really just a...
No, also
attitude
not
or
not
sort of a-
using a single-use straw or plastics or whatever, but ordering tons from Amazon or Shopee or Lazada.
Yeah. Are we hypocritical, right? Just...
So it's kind of, I'm not sure if that's, it's all anecdotal from what I see, because the younger folk, at least, in my household, they tend to order a lot of stuff online.
Yeah, but they won't drink with the straw. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's also got to do with, like, I guess the way that we live. So we try to advocate for more mindful consumption because it's so easy to, consume a lot. There's this thing called the linear economy. But that's when we take something, from natural resources from the earth, we make it into something and we throw it away without really thinking, hey, can we use it again? Do we actually need another thing? And we keep taking and we keep throwing. And that's something that we want to try to stop. We don't want to say stop consuming at all, but let's consume less. And how do we do it a little bit better through...
So the mindful consuming rather than mindless consuming.
Yeah, which is very hard because you go online, you want to buy one thing, but then you go, oh, this is only $2.99. Why not? Right?
So before we get to residents and domestic waste, Prof, want to help us unpack this. One of the questions that I had in the statistics was, they said a big contribution to the overall drop in recycling rates was put down to paper recycling has dropped. From more than 50% to about 31% 10 years later. So NEA said that this is due to structural factors such as freight costs and commodity prices. So this was a bit of a head scratcher for me. So maybe you can explain to me what exactly this means.
Well, when we put items like paper or even plastics into the recycling bin, they get sent to first the sorting facility that will sort this into the different components. And then the sorting facilities will have to look for buyers of these items to be recycled. So plastics will be sent to some plastic recyclers, paper will be sent to paper recyclers. The structural issues mentioned here would be that the cost for recycling might have increased because there might not be a lot of actual processing factories here in Singapore to recycle the paper, so they have to ship it elsewhere. So ship it to Malaysia or Indonesia. And because of the increase in freight costs, the shipping costs, that increases the cost of recycling of that paper. And when that increases,
doesn't make business sense anymore.
Not with compared to virgin paper. So if nobody's buying it, then the paper doesn't get recycled, even though they have been sorted.
Right.
So they just get being sent to the incinerators.
No. So if I put glass bottles faithfully, wash them, put them in, there's a chance that they may not get sent out for and they might be item. Incinerated or any recycling material.
I think just to add on, I think it's quite key to see that recycling is also a business and there's like cost, there's profits to be able for people
it's not
to
a bleeding heart issue.
Yeah, so you can put it into the bin, you can be reprocessed into recycled materials, but at the end of the day, you still need businesses to increase their recycled content in products. You need consumers to want to use recycled items to be able to drive the economy a little bit more, and so recyclers find it worthwhile to actually do the whole...
Ironically, it's almost because we don't consume more, right? You don't consume more, use more, therefore recycle more and have more for
you don't consume more of the right thing.
Of the right thing, okay.
The recycled
the recyclable stuff, right?
Yeah.
But even if we do, you're saying it doesn't really happen here because, well, Singapore's quite a small country, and by virtue of the volume we generate, is not really a sustainable business model.
I think we shouldn't put all the blame on the consumers in that sense. There's also the whole bit on, hey, can businesses, step up to say, hey, I want to put more recycled content into my products, but, have those products still have the same functionality, or thinking about the whole system. How do we close the loop in recycling to make it a little bit more
but
tenable?
it's tough, right? So, for example, if I want to set up a say a paper recycling plant or whatever, it's machines, it's infrastructure, it's people, it's cost, right?
And you would need a lot of paper for you to make money from it.
Exactly.
Right?
To turn all these stuff into shoes and bags and things that people will buy, is that...
Well, what Huileng is talking about is in addition to that. So the cost for recycling is there. In a way, it's a fixed cost. If the government can subsidize some of these in Singapore, for example, land costs, that will definitely help. But the other part of it is who would make use of the material once it's recycled. So right now, there's not enough of that.
So take an example. Plastic bottles, water bottles, now not very trendy. So if we all switch to glass, for instance, which can be recycled, would that make sense then for a business to then say, I will recycle glass? Right? We
need to see it as, not business as usual, but to look at it as the whole ecosystem. To really drive change.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually surprised us, because Crispina and I were talking about earlier, that some items people think can be recycled, but actually cannot. Like you were talking about
Yeah, because I was asking him
milk
about
cartons or-
paper cups, right?
Paper cups.
Like coffee cups.
coffee cups.
And then he was saying that it's got wax, so you can't recycle
you can't
it.
recycle it.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Unless you can separate that
Yeah.
plastic part away from the fiber part, which some places do, but it increases the cost.
Right.
There we go again, right? Yeah.
Yeah, even paper. I remember we were doing this story, and the moment I get rendang sauce on it,
yeah.
it's contaminated. It
Yeah.
can't be recycled anymore.
Yes. Okay, that one.
But I will add to that to say that, when it's food contamination or even when it's a mixed kind of materials, I think the bigger issue is when it's contaminating other stuff that's in the bin. So our bins, as you know, our blue bins have, you can put in paper, plastic, metals or glass. You put in a can of Coca-Cola that is half drunk.
Right.
It spills all over. You are contaminating everything else that's in that bin. And that's why, those stuff cannot be recycled at all. And that contamination rate is the high thing that we want to tackle as well.
Okay, let's go to households. I mean, I know we don't want to blame people all the time, but okay, so 72% of households say they do recycle. That means the spirit is very willing, right? But the last mile is the issue. Huileng, you've been in the space for quite some time, right? What's the biggest reason why?
When we've gone door to door to do some surveys or road shows, we realize it's quite important to do two things. One is people have to connect with the minds and connect with the hearts, right? So connecting the minds is more than just recycling is good and recycling saves the earth. I think it's more right now, how can we for sure say that when we put something into the bin or when we send something for recycling, it really gets recycled?
Okay, so they don't trust that it does get recycled.
Yes, that is
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
The second one is that the bins that they see are so messy sometimes, right? It looks like
Yeah,
the general
the
trash
blue bin, which
bins.
is like
There's all sorts of
yeah.
stuff in it.
And they're like,
Good stuff.
hey, as my things being really recycled, or is it just going to
Right.
be like thrown away?
So what's the point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so we have to, really understand the infrastructure, find different ways, maybe different kinds of infrastructure, segregated waste recycling that can nudge them to do it a little bit better, to convince them that recycling still works.
We did a quick poll on CNA social media channels and received more than 17,000 votes. Some 64% of you said that yes, we recycle because it matters. So the hard part is working, right? The hard part is working. I was quite surprised. So good job, CNA followers. And those who don't recycle, two were their top reasons. One, the bins are always full. Two is this thing where they say it's already contaminated. So what's the point? Which is why they throw everything into the regular bin. In fact, 40%, right, is contaminated according to, that sounds like quite a lot. Why is it that Korea, Japan, Taiwan can do this, can nick this contamination problem, but we can't?
The critical part for those countries is that their wastes are being sorted by the general public. So they don't have a general recycling bin where you put everything
Okay.
in commingled recycling. So in a lot of countries where they have commingled recycling, contamination does tend to happen. In Europe, in US, they do this a lot and they found that it happens. But in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, they have separate recycling bins. But they don't actually have bins. When they actually dispose of it, they have to pack it separately and then different trucks will come to collect them separately. So when you sort them in that sense, they generally would not be contaminated.
So instead of us having one big blue bin, I can imagine 5 smaller bins in place, each for slightly different items. One for glass, one for cardboard, one for, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, in Japan, they probably would have 80 different types.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
bins. They ask you
they
to sort
even
them.
have a plant, recycle, just for plant cuttings, like
Horticultural waste. Yes.
horticultural waste. which
Actually,
is-
we do too in Singapore.
Yeah. No, yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
actually,
Where
we
do you
do
live
have. Yeah.
that you have
Yeah.
horticultural waste?
I mean,
bin?
I have a small garden.
They do come around, private estates to really pick up the horticultural waste to do the recycling. But,
Yeah.
in general, I think if we look at our landscape, there are some bins that are already, just collecting that single material. So, the textile bins, that's just collecting textile.
Yes.
There are paper bins as well.
Yeah.
And there's also e-waste, of course, that's regulated.
Okay, so the
there are
question
some-
is there enough? Right? Okay, so I understand that in some of these other countries, they are homes, right? Ours, HDB flats. I know the new flats have chutes outside and they have recycling kind of
recycling chute
bins,
and a
right?
trash chute.
Yeah,
so
and a
two
trash
separate
chute,
ones.
right?
Yeah.
So that's a start because it's on every floor. Do you think that we need to do more infrastructurally?
If you look at what the countries you mentioned earlier, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, in the cities they actually don't live in landed properties. They
That's
also
true.
live in
Yes.
high
Apartments,
rises.
yeah.
And what they do is they get the people not to use chutes. They don't have chutes. You have to dispose of your waste by bringing it down to the trucks when they come round to collect it at a certain time of the day. If you miss that
I
time,
know.
you wait for the next week.
You think that will work in Singapore?
We're very spoiled in Singapore, actually, to have our trash collected every day. It's not a normal thing. In many parts of the world, trash guys come by once every, twice a week maybe? You know, that kind of stuff. If your trash isn't out Tuesday, then good luck. You got to wait till next Tuesday, you know?
Yeah, that sounds tough, right? I mean, for us, because we're so dense, we produce quite a bit of trash.
But are we spoiled? So they, in a way, were trained better and become part of their culture. Here, so convenient, just throw it at any time, you know?
And every day somebody's picking it up.
Yeah, exactly. And so we don't try so hard. We don't care.
And it's hard to change that mindset.
Yeah,
Once
yeah.
you are used to it, the facilities are there for
Yeah.
a single commingled recycling bin. It's very hard to change people to say that now you have to sort it and then bring it down separately. Some people will still do, but
Yeah.
you would say the majority
But
will not.
here in the office, we have recycling bins too. And we do have one for paper, one for e-waste, one for plastic. And it's increased in terms of people recycling having because it's easy, it looks
It's just
nice,
there.
and you look in and you know that it hasn't been contaminated. So you don't want to be the bad guy to do that, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
generally
yeah.
everyone
There's
is
even
fairly
a food
responsible.
compost machine.
Yeah.
Which I dare not open and look in. But, you know.
The other day I was at the coffee shop, I had a plastic bottle, drank my water. I was like, oh, where can I throw this? And she's just like, oh, just throw it in the rubbish with the rest of the stuff. They did not have a recycling option.
So speaking of convenience, actually that's the other thing that we compete with. Like our general trash disposal infrastructure is so efficient, it's so convenient.
Too efficient.
Ironically.
Maybe, right? But that's our history of being a very clean and green kind of country. So if you want to put in a separate infrastructure for recycling, it has to be as convenient. If not, again goes back to connecting with your minds and hearts to
Yeah.
make sure that people want to go the extra mile to sort and bring it downstairs, no less, right? To throw it rather than just use their chutes. at home.
Yeah, Steve, I was talking to you about it,
Yeah.
about this company called 800 Super, which has, I don't know whether you've heard of it, Huileng.
okay.
It's they've piloted a rather extensive recycling system using an app as well, which includes food waste, which they give in sealed containers, and people have to come downstairs and throw their trash. And so they're going to expand it because they have some teething issues, obviously, because, people kind of need to get used to the system. One thing that struck me about that system is that there's an incentive. There are NTUC vouchers. And as every Singaporean knows, NTUC vouchers always work. Do you think that we could one day do without an incentive?
Once
Sure.
everyone gets used to it,
Yeah.
then you could slowly reduce the incentive. The other one is the plastic bottles, the return your bottles
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
u-
Yes, that's
systems.
right.
So you used to get the incentive, but they cut the amount, but people still do. Then eventually we collect
Correct.
our bottles and slowly we are able to sort them and recycle them.
In Singapore, we can do it two ways. Either we provide the incentive or we just provide a fine, right? Because that gets people in line real quick. And in a way,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
almost think if we had the infrastructure to have all these separate bins and go that if you contaminate it, put some CCTV camera looking at the blue
Oh
bin,
my goodness,
catch people. I mean, this is really,
Yeah.
the typical Singapore way to get things done. But I think it actually can be done. And then eventually, once we get used to it, people will start becoming more responsible in what they do.
There are some bins, the paper bins, they have CCTVs.
Yeah.
So I don't think they catch and they don't fine. It's not punitive, but sometimes I
Who's
think
checking
they
the
do
CCTV to
the
see
recyclers, like
if,
yeah,
they do?
Yeah. They tell us that they do. I've not audited them or anything
No, but
like that.
I
actually-
swear, if you see an old person putting something that's not meant to be there, they'll just say, okay, never
Yeah,
mind.
they'll probably close one eye.
Yeah,
But also
yeah.
because if you contaminate all my stuff, then I can't make money from it.
I mean, when it's an incentive system, anecdotally, people are saying that because the incentive is by weight that you've
Yeah.
put into the bin, right? People are like wetting the newspaper, so it's a bit heavier, and so you get a little bit more cash. So there are some of these
Wow.
gaming situations. I think
Okay.
actually just to add on to what Prof has mentioned, you could also get a scheme that sort of finances itself, right? So
Yeah.
for plastic bottles, there's a deposit refund scheme.
Yeah.
So, when consumers buy that bottle, they pay that 10 cents more. When they return that bottle, they get the 10 cents back.
Yes.
So in that
Yeah.
sense, it's not incentive, but yet it nudges behavior.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
You're probably too young, but it's becoming full circle. Last
yeah.
time when you drink your Coke bottle, you return it, get 10 cents back, right? You know?
Glass
So it
bottles.
works.
Glass
you see.
bottles, right? Yeah.
Clearly it works.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's come back to the overall recycling rate that the government wants us to achieve. Do you think that 70% by 2030 achievable? Short answer. Yes.
Short
no?
answer is yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes?
Okay.
I'm
You're so
confident.
positive.
He's optimistic.
Optimistic, but the total recycling rate comprises two different elements. One is the consumer, and the other one the industrial.
Yes. Of
The
course.
industrial recycling actually is very effective.
Yeah.
Okay.
90%, 99%. So that one it fluctuates as it happens this year. It dropped down to about 60 something percent, but it could go up to 70%. So it's just really nudging the consumer side on a couple of areas, food and plastics. Those are the major consumer disposable waste. If we can get people to sort and recycle those better, I think we can reach it quite easily.
I mean, I agree with you that the industry waste or non-domestic waste, the recycling rates have been high. Domestic sector, I think it's not just about increasing the rates. You have to go from a downward trajectory to upward to reach that 30%. And that's really tough. I think, I maybe take a less positive view or a more realistic view to say maybe we need to change the infrastructure, get people to sort better. Infrastructure is a way to nudge people to sort
Right.
better, I would
Okay.
think. And maybe that's what has to change. Sorting at source, sorting more upstream, and having more closed loops
But
kind of systems.
it really does sound that is a full chain. So if the guy selling me the stuff sold me sustainable items that I could recycle, then the next step when I use it and consume it, I'm more likely to recycle it. And then further on, if there's an incentive given, I may also want to then recycle. So everything kind of connects, right? Which will then give us that full ecosystem,
So I
which right
think-
now seems to be lacking.
Yeah, so I think that's the structural shift that we really need, right? It's moving from a linear economy, the take, make, waste, and
Yeah.
not really caring about what happens to the waste, to a bit more circular, be it consumer behavior, be it businesses. But how do we be a little bit better in terms of recycling, but also more upstream, reuse, reduce, repairability, right? Let's have more products that can be repaired rather than throwing it away. So a lot of this is about mindset changes and how do we just really see the whole thing as a closed
Yeah.
loop.
One thing you think will make a huge difference.
Getting people to sort that source, waste segregation right from the start, the point of generation at the household is something that needs to be looked at and a little bit more seriously. So putting in the infrastructure, maybe complementing the co-mingled blue bins with the Super 800 kinds of bins, or even the education to tell people, hey, recycle this material because this material will be used in a closed loop back into your own new items. I think that would really make a difference. So more emphasis in terms of infrastructure and education when it comes to pushing the sorting at source kind of behavioral change.
Mine would be a bit more complex. But if I look at the entire product chain, then what I would look into is how to maximize what we can make use of throughout the entire chain. Take, for example, food waste. Food is highly valuable. You would maximize it.
Yeah.
But what you don't or cannot eat, people throw them out. But you can collect them. Right now, what we can do is we just throw them out with other things. But
Yeah.
you collect them separately. The government is doing this with the new TWAS indexes. Then you put the food waste in with the sewage waste, you generate biogas, you can get
Okay.
heat and electricity out of it, but you can also get fertilizer out of it as one of the other products and use that as fertilizer for growing more food. So that goes back into the cycle. So we should start to look into systems like this, then move it to plastics, move that to the paper,
Okay.
move that to other things. Then
So that item is no longer just of value for that one purpose. Food is not just food for me, but it's also food for the garden in a way, food for providing
Yes, yeah.
electricity later on.
yeah, the next food you'll be eating, some of the beer actually made from recycled food, right?
Yeah, don't tell me anymore. I don't want to know. In Singapore, I strongly feel that in a way, a monetary incentive and penalty often seems to be the most effective. Plastic bags, for instance, now, I don't know, I'm like many other people, want to save 10 cents, I will stuff it in my pocket just to not buy a bag.
No,
Because-
now I'm buying bags at the shops that sell bin bags because
Oh,
I
the
don't
tr-
get them
that's
at
true.
the NTUC or
But I-
cold storage, right?
But the amount that you buy is probably less than the number that you have taken from the supermarket.
Oh,
so
really?
it's cutting the excess, not like
I
really
see.
banning in
yeah,
that
yeah.
sense.
But
Okay,
could
I
there be
don't
a
know.
point where we wouldn't even need plastic bags if we were that sorted
Yeah.
in our trash? One day. I don't know.
You still need bags to bag.
But you still need bags
waste.
for
For
your
wet waste.
eggshells, right?
Wet waste, yeah.
Oh,
maybe.
to bag all the waste.
Yeah, to bag waste.
Yeah, because if you don't bag it also, then it leaks, then you have rats. So it really is a vicious cycle here that we're talking about.
Yep. Thank you, both of you, to come and explain to us. Okay, so
Yeah.
Steve, for me,
Yeah.
I feel like, yes, it would help infrastructurally if we had like one of those 5 different, types
Yeah,
of
for sure.
bins. But I think, as Huileng says, mindful consumption is the start of everything. To me, rather than throw everything out the minute it doesn't work, to try and see if we can extend the span of stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you, but it's just that things are so cheap nowadays. Rather than fix it, it's so much easier to buy a new one.
Thank
Are
you
you
very
convinced?
much.
Are you going to go back and start recycling, Crispy? Or you're...
But I don't have a bin to recycle my stuff in. That's the starting point.
You got to go to one of the new BTO flats where they have the chute.
Okay, that's another discussion and problem altogether. Okay, thank you so much for coming. Thanks to the team behind this production, Tiffany Ang, Joanne Chan, Junani Johari, Saya Win. Sound mixing by Ken Delbridge. Till next time, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.